An eye for an eye. We all know the phrase. But did you know those 4 terrifying words come from a giant 7-foot-tall obsidian black rock that forged the first superpower in human history? Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back. Today, we are cracking the seal on the ultimate ancient legal document, the Code of Hammurabi. This isn't some dusty museum exhibit. This is the Diorite Testament, the single, monolithic blueprint for modern law. King Hammurabi didn't just conquer an empire in Mesopotamia. He carved accountability into stone, pioneering concepts we still use today, like the presumption of innocence and detailed, brutal punishments for everything from a doctor's medical malpractice to a builder's shoddy construction. But here's the mind-blowing twist you won't hear in history class. Hammurabi's justice wasn't blind. It was a cold, hard social calculus. If you were an elite Amēlum, you demanded the full price, physical retribution. But if you were a simple Muškēnum, you just got a cash payment. It was a completely different price for the same crime, based entirely on your social status. How did this one pillar unify a chaotic kingdom, claim its authority directly from the sun god Shamash, and lay the conceptual groundwork for every legal system that followed? Stick around. We're unlocking the secrets of Babylon's ruthless, bureaucratic, and utterly brilliant legal machine. This is where the modern rule of law truly began. Let's go. The Diorite Testament, codification, social calculus, and the juridical legacy of Hammurabi's law. The Code of Hammurabi, a monumental inscription from the Old Babylonian period, represents a pivotal achievement in the history of written jurisprudence. Composed during the reign of its namesake monarch, Hammurabi circa 1792 to 1752 BC, Middle Chronology. The code transcends its status as a mere collection of statutes, functioning instead as a sophisticated declaration of state governance, social structure, and divine sanction. Its textual and physical architecture provides unique insight into the intricate relationship between political theology, economic reality, and the quest for centralized justice in ancient Mesopotamia. Chapter 1. The Ascent of Babylon and the Foundation of Royal Justice. The Mesopotamian Crucible and Geopolitical Strategy. The Old Babylonian state emerged as an Akkadian-speaking cultural area headquartered in the city of Babylon in central southern Mesopotamia, though the ruling dynasty, founded circa 1894 BC, was of Amorite descent. Hammurabi successfully transformed this regional power into a short-lived empire that briefly dominated rivals such as Assyria in Upper Mesopotamia and Elam to the east. To secure this newly consolidated empire, Hammurabi employed calculated ideological strategies. He consciously adopted the deliberate archaism Mat Akkad, the country of Akkad, retrospectively applying it to Babylonia. This political linkage to the preceding glorious Akkadian Empire provided profound cultural and political legitimacy, reassuring a diverse populace that his new regime was rooted in deep Mesopotamian tradition and upheld the ancestral habits revered by the Babylonians. By invoking the past, the Amorite dynasty asserted itself not as a disruptive force, but as the inevitable successor to ancient Mesopotamian political continuity. The hydraulic imperative and economic centralization. The sustenance of Lower Mesopotamia was entirely dependent upon centralized control of water. The southern region receives almost no effective rainfall, necessitating large-scale complex irrigation infrastructure that was often supervised by the state or temple estates. The challenge was not merely supply, but timing, as the major river floods occurred in spring, threatening growing crops, demanding the construction of canals to deliver controlled irrigation water to fields further from the riverbanks. Hammurabi's governance was inextricably linked to this hydraulic requirement. His investment in infrastructure, such as the construction and maintenance of these canals, was not just a public works project, but an essential measure ensuring high agricultural returns, particularly for staple crops like barley, dates, and sesame. By issuing proclamations that cancel the debts of his subjects and ensuring the upkeep of irrigation networks, the king cemented his role as the necessary administrator of the land. This necessity for constant coordinated resource management provided the fundamental justification for the state's stringent laws governing land tenure, canal maintenance liability, and agricultural theft. Babylon's strategic location also facilitated its rise as a major commercial center, engaging in extensive long-distance trade with distant regions, including Anatolia, exchanging textiles for copper and silver, Turkey, India, and Egypt. This highly specialized commercial system relied heavily on standardized financial instruments. Transactions often utilized minas and shekels, standardized weights of silver and gold, as units of exchange for high-value commodities. The code's voluminous attention to commercial law, contracts, interest rates, and precise professional accountability, discussed in Chapter 4, directly addressed the state's need to protect this vital, complex economic engine and mitigate the risks inherent in specialized, long-distance commerce. The Divine Commission, Kittu and Meşarum. The authority of the Code was predicated on a powerful political theology. Hammurabi did not portray himself as an arbitrary despot, but as the divinely selected agent of cosmic order. In the Babylonian worldview, the cosmos was founded upon immutable truths. Kittu and Justice Meşarum. Hammurabi proclaimed himself the Shar Meşarum, just king, asserting that the gods, specifically Anu and Bel, and notably Shamash, the sun god and deity of justice, had commissioned him to safeguard these principles and prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. This divine mandate is explicitly rendered in the Stele's visual iconography. The top of the basalt monument features a relief carving depicting Hammurabi standing before the seated god Shamash. Shamash, identifiable by his horned crown and rays, is illuminating the truth and is shown extending the rod and ring, symbols of authority, and the instruments of measurement and judgment to the king. This visual narrative establishes that the legal statutes detailed below are not merely royal whims, but the literal enactment of divine will, ensuring their unquestionable legitimacy and reinforcing the principle that the ruler himself was bound by the higher mandate of Kittu and Meşarum. Chapter 2. Architectonics of Authority. Structure and Function of the Diorite Monument. Form, Content, and the Debate on Legal Function. The primary copy of the Code of Hammurabi is inscribed on a 2.25-meter-tall basalt stele. Discovered in 1901 at Susa, modern Iran, where it had been taken as war plunder, it remains the longest, best organized, and best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. The approximately 4,130 lines of cuneiform script are traditionally divided into three distinct literary sections. The Poetic Prologue. This section utilizes a high poetic register to celebrate Hammurabi's pious acts, military conquests, and extensive public works, rhetorically building the case for his suitability, as commanded by the god Marduk, to bring justice and well-being to the land. The Casuistic Laws. The main body, comprising roughly 4/5 of the inscription, contains 282 articles expressed as conditional if-then sentences, e.g., if a man does X, then Y shall be done to him. These laws are broadly organized by subject, spanning diverse legal concerns from false testimony and theft, sections 1 to 5, to labor regulations, sections 26 to 41, family law, sections 127 to 194, and physical assault, sections 195 to 214. The Poetic Epilogue. This conclusion reinforces the monument's intended perpetuity. It contains solemn promises of divine blessing for future kings who uphold the stele, alongside dire curses against any ruler who attempts to deface or alter its sacred inscription, emphasizing the eternal, immutable quality of the codified justice. While initially viewed as modern prescriptive legislation intended for daily application, the prevailing scholarly understanding suggests a more nuanced function. Many Assyriologists now regard the code less as a strict statute and more as a document of jurisprudence or legal theory. Its primary purpose was to publicly memorialize and proclaim Hammurabi's idealized judicial standards, serving as a collection of exemplary legal precedents intended to guide magistrates and ensure systematic consistency across the sprawling empire. The text's influence extended long past Hammurabi's reign. It was copied and studied in scribal schools for over 1,000 years, underscoring its pivotal role as an intellectual and ideological foundation for subsequent generations of educated Babylonian administrators. Historical precedent and the calculus of retribution. The act of codifying laws was not unique to Hammurabi. He drew upon a well-established Mesopotamian legal tradition that included earlier texts, most notably the laws of Ur-Nammu, circa 21st century BC. These predecessor codes shared the tripartite structure of prologue, casuistic rules, and epilogue. However, Hammurabi's code is distinguished by a calculated shift in punitive philosophy, specifically concerning physical injury. Earlier codes, such as that of Ur-Nammu, typically favored pecuniary fines, silver payments, as compensation for bodily harm, meaning injuries resulted in economic loss rather than corporal retribution. Hammurabi's code, conversely, integrated the doctrine of Lex Talionis, retribution in kind, famously summarized as an eye for an eye, but applied it differentially. This adoption of harsher physical symmetry, particularly when the offense occurred between members of the aristocratic class, served multiple purposes. It projected the centralized state's absolute power through visceral public punishment and simultaneously appeased the honor culture of the ruling Amēlum class, which demanded symbolic equivalence rather than simple financial settlement for violations of dignity. This strategic politicization of punishment was crucial for maintaining order and legitimacy across the newly expanded imperial territories. Chapter 3. The Calculus of Status. Inequality as Law. Defining the tripartite legal estate. A central defining feature of the code is its reliance on a rigid social hierarchy, where judicial outcomes, penalties, and privileges vary dramatically based on the status of both the perpetrator and the victim. Babylonian society was legally stratified into three main estates: the Amēlum, the Muškēnum, and the Ardu. The Amēlum was the elite or patrician class, comprising the king, high officials, professionals, and property owners. These individuals possessed full civil rights. Their familial milestones, birth, marriage, death, were formally registered, and they controlled ancestral estates. Their high status meant they benefited from certain privileges, but they were also subject to the heaviest punishments and higher fines for their offenses. The principle of Lex Talionis was primarily reserved for injuries involving this class. The Muškēnum constituted the free commoner class. Often characterized as landless, they were sometimes dependent on the palace or royal estates for tenancy or income, and frequently resided in separate districts of the city. While free, their lives and injuries were given an explicit, quantifiable economic valuation. Critically, if injured, the Muškēnum was legally obligated to accept predetermined monetary compensation, fines paid in silver, rather than demanding corporal retaliation. The Ardu was the slave class, legally defined as the chattel property of their master, who could be either an Amēlum or a Muškēnum. Although considered property whose upkeep and compensation were managed by the owner, the Ardu retained a notable degree of juridical capacity. Slaves could own property and even other slaves, and they possessed the right to purchase their own freedom. This stratification reveals a calculated economic valuation embedded in the law. Where injury occurred between two members of the Amēlum class, the law insisted on symmetrical retribution, e.g., blinding an eye for blinding an eye to preserve the perceived dignity and honor of the elite. Conversely, when injury involved the Muškēnum class, the substitution of physical retaliation with fixed silver payments ensured that disruptions to the social and economic order, particularly concerning labor on royal lands, were managed through predictable financial means, thereby prioritizing economic stability over corporal vengeance. Family law and lineage economics. Though Babylonian society operated under a patriarchal structure where women were subordinate to their male relatives, the code granted women significant legal standing concerning property and economic independence. Women frequently appear in Old Babylonian documents as owners of houses and fields and were allowed to run businesses alongside their husbands. The meticulous provisions regarding dowries, nudunu, and inheritance rights highlight that the code's family laws were intrinsically linked to stabilizing interclan economics. The law ensured that wealth brought into a marriage by the woman was protected, often guaranteeing that this inherited property would return to her original family's lineage or pass directly to her children. This legal mechanism was designed to prevent the economic dilution of natal family estates by the in-laws, thus serving as a crucial structural safeguard for interclan capital transmission in an agrarian society. Chapter 4. Judicial Procedure, Accountability, and Specialized Regulation. Procedural Rigor and Divine Arbitration. The judicial procedures outlined in the Code establish some of the earliest recorded notions of formal due process. The system emphasized the presentation of cases before judges, supported by evidence and the testimony of witnesses. Notably, the Code articulated an early framework for the concept of the presumption of innocence. However, to maintain the rigor and stability of the court system, the Code implemented a severe deterrent mechanism against malicious litigation. In cases involving capital offenses, the burden of proof was placed entirely on the accuser. If the accuser failed to substantiate the charge before the elders or the court, the accuser himself faced a death sentence. This extreme procedural risk functioned as a powerful societal filter, minimizing frivolous claims, ensuring judicial efficiency, and protecting the populace from destabilizing, unsubstantiated accusations, thereby reinforcing the state's promise of predictable justice. In instances where human testimony was unreliable, conflicting, or non-existent, such as accusations of sorcery or adultery, the Code authorized the recourse to divine arbitration through the river ordeal, Metamti. The accused would be subjected to the Euphrates River, believed to be a manifestation of the god Idlurugu. The outcome, sinking or successfully floating, retrieval, determined guilt or innocence. This theological intervention served as a crucial judicial release valve, providing definitive, supernaturally sanctioned closure for cases that defied human resolution, thus maintaining public faith in the ultimate fairness of the legal system. State enforcement of professional accountability. The complexity of the old Babylonian economy demanded specialized knowledge, and the Code enforced rigorous standards of professional conduct across critical trades through a system of retributive liability. The severity of the punishment often varied based on the resultant harm and the social status of the victim, reflecting the differential application of justice throughout the law. Construction. Accountability was draconian for builders. If a house collapsed due to poor construction and caused the death of the homeowner, the builder was put to death. If the collapse killed the owner's son, the builder's son faced execution. This absolute penalty ensured rigorous quality control in vital infrastructure. Medical practitioners. Surgeons were subject to high fees for successful treatments, e.g., 10 shekels for operating on an Amēlum, but faced severe corporal punishment for negligence. If a surgeon caused the death of an Amēlum or blinded him, the surgeon lost his hands. Veterinary science. Reflecting the economic importance of livestock, the code includes early regulations for veterinary medicine. A successful major operation on an ox or ass earned the practitioner 1/6 of a shekel. However, if the operation resulted in the animal's death, the surgeon was liable to compensate the owner with 1/4 of the animal's value. Maritime industry. Shipbuilders were mandated to provide a specific warranty period. If a boat was damaged within a year due to poor construction, the builder was required to repair the defect or provide compensation for the resulting losses. These regulations demonstrate the state's commitment to minimizing economic risk and instability caused by professional incompetence, leveraging the legal system to enforce high standards among its specialized labor force.
Chapter 5. Enduring Legal Resonance and Modern Legacy. The Path of Transmission, from cuneiform to Western Law. The Code of Hammurabi established a legal paradigm whose influence resonated across the ancient Near East. The casuistic format and fundamental principles, particularly the doctrine of Lex Talionis and regulations concerning property damage, such as the law regarding a man-goring ox, show marked similarities with later law collections, most notably the Hebrew Covenant Code found in the Book of Exodus. While some researchers have proposed theories of direct borrowing, the dominant scholarly consensus holds that these similarities are likely the result of inheriting a vast, common Mesopotamian legal tradition. These foundational principles, focused on proportionality in punishment, consumer protection, and the regulation of debt, were disseminated across the Levant through cultural contact and commerce. This Mesopotamian legal heritage continued to influence judicial development in the region, affecting later legal systems such as Syro-Roman law and, subsequently, Islamic jurisprudence in Mesopotamia. Although the code's direct influence on distant systems like the Greek Gorton Code or the Roman 12 Tables remains debated and difficult to establish conclusively, its status as the earliest known comprehensive codification established a global blueprint for legal organization. A precursor to the rule of law. The enduring significance of the code lies in its conceptual leap toward formalized justice. By amending, codifying, and publicly inscribing his laws on durable stone pillars accessible to the populace, Hammurabi fundamentally centralized legal authority and introduced a powerful precedent for legal transparency. This act solidified the notion that judicial proceedings should be based on a fixed, established, and public written framework, rather than relying solely on arbitrary royal decree or shifting local custom. This formalization reinforced the political theology that even the king was subject to the cosmic mandate of Kitu and Muškēnum. The code thus stands as a crucial early expression of the aspiration for social justice and predictable governance, formalizing the concept of a non-arbitrary legal system. This foundational achievement, the rigorous written systematization of rules, represents a pivotal conceptual groundwork that continues to be cited as a precursor to the modern ideal of the rule of law and remains relevant in contemporary discussions concerning legal jurisprudence and the structure of codified law.
And that is how a giant slab of diorite stone from 1750 BC became the intellectual foundation of Western jurisprudence. We've cracked the code, and what we found is a paradox. Hammurabi's justice was both groundbreakingly sophisticated and brutally unequal. He enshrined the ideal of visible, published law, a monumental promise to the populace that justice was real. He pioneered due process, insisting on evidence, witnesses, and even the terrifying final judgment of the river ordeal. But here's the cold, hard truth. The famous Lex Talionis, the eye for an eye, was a privilege, a right of the elite Amēlum class. If you injured an elite, you paid in kind. If you injured a Muškēnum or a slave, you simply paid in silver. The code was not a declaration of equality. It was a surgical tool designed to maintain a rigid, predictable social hierarchy. Yet, this calculated system, this Diorite testament, is where the modern world truly begins. It laid the blueprint for codification, for professional accountability, and for the revolutionary concept that even the king himself, the agent of the gods Shamash and Marduk, was bound by the higher immutable standard of cosmic justice, Kitu and Misharum. So what do you think? Was Hammurabi a just king, or the ultimate political strategist who used the law to solidify his empire's power? Let me know your fiercest theories in the comments section below. If this deep dive into the architecture of ancient justice blew your mind, smash that like button, ring the bell for notifications, and subscribe so you don't miss our next video, where we break down history's greatest blueprints. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next civilization.